serious. What choice have you made that negatively impacted your life? How did you cope with the consequences? Jokes, puns, and off-topic comments are not permitted in any comment, parent or child. Parent comments that aren't from the target group will be removed, along with their child replies. Report comments that violate these rules. Posts that have few relevant answers within the first hour, and posts that are not appropriate for the serious tag will be removed. Consider doing an AMA request instead. Thanks for your cooperation and enjoy the discussion. I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit if you have any questions or concerns. Not watching what and how much I ate for the majority of my life and becoming pretty much morbidly obese. I lost the weight and am at a healthy weight now, but the mental effects still linger 3 years on. Advice: if you're thinking about losing weight, fucking do it. It's one of the best decisions I've made in my life. But also know that it's not a cure-all. At some point in my life I chose to be extremely risk-avoidant and never figured out how to turn that off again. It's not a great way to live. I struggle to make changes and set goals if I have the slightest fear I might fail. Spoiler alert: you can fail at almost anything. Fear of failure should not rule your life. I know that in my head, but acting on it is a whole other thing. I pretty much never made an effort to maintain any form relationship with anybody. I never reach out, text back, go out with, hang out with, and apart from always being nice and kind, I'm never there if anyone needs me. Nowadays I'm mostly lonely. It doesn't feel so bad, but sometimes I wished I had cared more about other people. I got heavily involved with the band scene in the 80s, yeah, I'm that old, and was a groupie. I spent most of my time cutting school and doing drugs rather than studying and working towards college. I got a pretty bad reputation around the conservative town I was living in, and there was constant talk about me that affected my family as far as them being shunned as well. I felt like shit over it and stopped with my drugging and hanging out with the band ways. I got serious about school and put my energy into doing better. I still kinda regret it because I really did create a lot of unnecessary stress and upset for my family. I don't dwell on it, and it's ancient history now. We ended up moving out of the area, state, and to a new state where I flew straight and started my first career, which was a machinist apprentice. I guess I turned out okay. I've been married happily 29 years, don't miss the old life at all. Haven't touched drugs since 1989 and I'm an HR director. Luckily my daughter is nothing like I was. Picked up a venomous snake, thinking I knew how to handle one from watching TV, and got bitten on the wrist. I held off getting help for like 10 minutes too, since I knew my parents would be really mad if I told them, and I figured it was likely to be a dry bite. I felt fine and mostly relieved. Until my arm started burning. I was crying and screaming for help. Parents drove me to the hospital. I started puking, feeling dizzy. The rest was a blur, but it was months before I regained the full use of my right hand, and some of the nerves are permanently damaged. Might be cliché, but using drugs and alcohol, a huge amount of my friends have passed from overdose or are in gaol. I'm good now, but it was a long rough road to get here. Buying a pet fox, I thought it'd be cute, which it was, and I could handle it, but for 99.99% of people it's not worth it at all. I got fired from my job for hygiene, despite showering twice a day. Friends stopped wanting me to hang out with them. House was destroyed. Can't sell it because it still smells. They said it's permanent, no sleep, very expensive, etc. I know people talk about having a degree and not being able to find a job. I can imagine how frustrating and discouraging that must be, but as someone who doesn't even have a degree in anything, I always feel like a loser when it comes time to write resume, or a conversation gets on the subject of what I've studied. I feel like I don't have anything to offer professionally, except my good work ethic and attitude. There are a lot of jobs out there that sound really appealing to me, but then I look at the qualifications required and I just don't have anything close. I survive because I'm handy and detail-oriented. I can fix things and people find me trustworthy. Also, and I have accumulated many tools to do whatever job, but there are definitely times where I feel like I should have pursued some professional, marketable degree or certification, something that I could put on a resume and say, hey, here's something I'm trained to do, by a recognized source, something to get my foot in the door. I moved 3 hours away from home to move in with my best friend, thinking it was a way to reset my life, quit my job, moved out of the fantastic townhome I was renting and didn't renew the lease. 7 months after I moved in, everything was going amazing. Then my friend rekindled a relationship with an old flame, and all of a sudden I'm being treated like shit, shunned, and the mental abuse she dished out was immense. Her and the flame are married now, and it's been 2 years since I blocked all forms of contact with her, so the fallout is, I have immense trust issues. Ever take back an ex? Yeah, that wound up being $15K down the drain. That's gonna take another 2 years to pay off with the loan I took out to get my finances in order after we broke up again. Don't take back exes. TLDR, lost weight too quickly. Ended up being addicted to the weight loss and got anorexia. There is no cope. Eating disorders are the deadliest psychological disorder, based on scientific literature. To avoid literal starving yourself to death, you have to gain the weight back. You cry, you fuck up your metabolism, you throw out all your laxative pills and you have to get blood work done. Your back hurts all the time because you've gained so much weight and your body is shocked and can't keep up. Your heart races super fast because of all the food. You have to have a support team of nutritionists, therapists, and doctors. You can never diet again without going off of the deep end, and you never, ever, ever forget the high of being thin, the rush of walking out of the gym after a fasted 5-hour session, the dopamine surge when the scale shows 1 pound less than what you thought possible. Stayed in a toxic relationship instead of going abroad to study. I still regret it to this day. It feels like I lost years of my life, and I cope with escapism, I guess. Love yourself before loving others. Quitting soccer when I was 18, I tossed out something that would have likely paid for my university, but my coach at the time was a prick and I was a hard-headed teenager who couldn't stand him. Never got back into it because I started to care about boys and dating in school more. I miss it, the feeling of running feels good. And always wondered what doors I closed for myself, all because I didn't have the fully developed brain to know that pricks exist everywhere and we just have to learn to work around them. Staying in a toxic friendship for too long, it took another person to get me to realize how bad it was until I got out. What can I say? I was as absolute shithead of a teenager and bombed out of high school in rather spectacular fashion. As a result, I was only ever good for menial jobs. All is not lost though, as having kids made me grow up very fast and I wound up going back to school and gaining my horticultural certificate. It meant a lot to me as my mom always said that I was nothing but a failure. We all make mistakes in life, but the only bad mistakes are ones you do not learn from. Sadly, I got involved in cheetah poaching when I was young. Posted about this elsewhere, but it fits here too. I know it was horrible. Even back then, I knew it was bad. The good news is I never killed a cheetah myself, but a friend I had gone to secondary school with told me it was good money and the get-rich-quick appeal was there for me. so I agreed to learn how to do it. We grew up with enough to eat, but we were poor, so it was hard to pass over an opportunity to potentially make a lot of money. Even though I knew it was wrong and illegal. Wasn't long before we were all caught. I'm still not exactly sure how. Their little ragtag gang of 6 would-be poachers must have been on the radar of anti-poaching groups long before I joined. After just a couple weeks of training with them, I got a knock on my door at 3 in the morning and was arrested. Fortunately, I didn't get any long prison time. But there was a punishment in some parts of Africa, where cheetah poachers could be forced to eat cheetah feces as a punishment. I was sentenced to it. I begged for jail time instead but didn't get it. Worst time of my life. But I will never forget that and thankfully got my life on track. Went to school, got a degree, eventually moved to Europe to study. Being hesitant to start taking antidepressants again. I took them when I was like 7, because I have trichotillomania, but got off of them pretty quickly because my parents didn't like how I acted on them or something. In middle school, I developed severe social anxiety that persisted all the way into college. Then I dropped out of college because public presentations would give me massive anxiety. It wasn't until the intrusive thoughts started that I decided enough was enough and started taking Zoloft. Now I take Zoloft and Wellbutrin. I still struggle with social anxiety and intrusive thoughts, but I can at least function and socialize like everyone else. I can even do public speaking now if need be. If I had been on antidepressants at the start of my social anxiety, I would probably have more friendships that didn't end up in falling outs. I would have been much more successful in orchestra. I was section leader of the second violins, and although I was extremely passionate about it, solos were absolutely agonizing for me. I probably wouldn't have done drugs in high school. I would never have started smoking. I jewel now. I wouldn't have missed out on so many different opportunities that would have been beneficial for my mental health and education. Now I'm $11,000 in student loan debt. I work full-time and I'm still paying off the student loans. Like 7 years later. It's so crazy how something like social anxiety can have such a big impact on your life. Things are fine now. I have regrets of my past, but I wouldn't change where I'm at now. I started doing drugs stronger than weed and alcohol. I quickly got addicted and lost respect for myself and my loved ones. I went to rehab, but I still haven't been able to stay completely clean. If I could go back in time and tell my younger self one thing, it would be don't do drugs. Last year in June, I decided to hang off a hoodoo, which is the native term for a large rock standing on top of a thinner base, so it looks like the rock is balancing. I had stood on it, and it seemed solid. I then had a great idea to hang off of it, and as soon as I put my weight on it, the rock gave way. I don't remember the fall, but I woke up farther down the cliff, and my left hand was severely mangled. My family was there, so we could get help fast. My dad had to drive me to the nearest town with the hospital, which was about 40 minutes away. It was then another 45 before I got any morphine to lessen the pain. I passed out after they gave it to me. I woke up in an ambulance, going to a bigger city because I needed a plastic surgeon to reattach my fingers. Was on and off then, and I went into the surgery room. They told me that they couldn't save my index finger, and they had to fuse 2 bones in my middle finger together because the knuckle was gone. 10 months later, living with basically 2.5 fingers and a thumb. It's been challenging, but since I've had no choice but to live with it, I've found the challenge fun. I have had no doubts in my mind that this should have killed me too. My dad, who had watched the fall before I disappeared, said I was folded over under the boulder. So, how I survived, I have no idea. I changed my major away from atmospheric science. That was the only thing I was ever truly passionate about, and now I barely get to look at the stuff. It made me lose pretty much all of my ambition for everything. As far as coping, I just read and write a lot for the sake of escapism. I make things for people, volunteer for good causes like helping at animal shelters, etc., trying to pretend that something I do matters. I guess since I'm not really doing anything interesting, I've just decided to stop trying and to be mediocre, but useful. I fucked up this semester with graduate school. Took 2 hard-ass classes while starting a 40-hour work schedule. I had to withdraw from one while I'm very worried about the other. What good would a grad degree be if your grades suck? I got bullied a lot growing up, and ended up very quick to be defensive. In high school, some prick tried to bully me physically and I went over the top on self-defense, landing me in juvie for a year and derailing my education. I moved 3 hours away from home to move in with my best friend, thinking it was a way to reset my life. Quit my job, moved out of the fantastic townhome I was renting and didn't renew the lease. 7 months after I moved in, everything was going amazing. Then my friend rekindled a relationship with an old flame, and all of a sudden I'm being treated like shit, shunned, and the mental abuse she dished out was immense. Her and the flame are married now, and it's been 2 years since I blocked all forms of contact with her. So the fallout is, I have immense trust issues. I said goodbye to the only person who could bring joy and meaning in my life in the past 1 fucking year. Now I literally wanna die. I just don't have guts to end it. I haven't felt that horrible, lowest low and lonely for 11 years. I started drinking, so apparently, not coping very well. I left really affordable and good state school for a private university because I was dating a manipulative wahoo who was way too old for me and he demanded that I move closer to him. I try not to linger too much on the past because my life turned out fine eventually, but sometimes I wonder what my journey would have been like if I stayed at the better school and just dumped him. Also wonder what it would be like to not be saddled with the debt I took on going to private school. Actually, I think I know the answer to that last one. Oh well, such is life. I made what I thought were the best choices for me at the time. Hindsight is always much, much better. Sadly, I got involved in cheetah poaching when I was young. Posted about this elsewhere, but it fits here too. I know it was horrible. Even back then, I knew it was bad. The good news is I never killed a cheetah myself, but a friend I had gone to secondary school with told me it was good money and the get-rich-quick appeal was there for me. So I agreed to learn how to do it. We grew up with enough to eat, but we were poor, so it was hard to pass over an opportunity to potentially make a lot of money. Even though I knew it was wrong and illegal. Wasn't long before we were all caught. I'm still not exactly sure how. Their little ragtag gang of 6 would-be poachers must have been on the radar of anti-poaching groups long before I joined. After just a couple weeks of training with them, I got a knock on my door at 3 in the morning and was arrested. Fortunately, I didn't get any long prison time. But there was a punishment in some parts of Africa, where cheetah poachers could be forced to eat cheetah feces as a punishment. I was sentenced to it. I begged for jail time instead but didn't get it. Worst time of my life. But I will never forget that and thankfully got my life on track. Went to school, got a degree, eventually moved to Europe to study. There's several, but the biggest I can't say due to privacy. One of the lesser choices was being a bully to another kid. I was bullied and had the misguided views that bullying meant you got friends. I bullied a bigger kid and never got to apologize. He was younger than me and passed away several years back. I feel so guilty about it, because I knew what being bullied felt like. The only positive thing that came from it is that I try my best to be nicer to people. I chose to do something wildly illegal, not drug or violence related. and did some time in federal prison and have a felony on my record. Coping with the consequences will last my whole life. How do I cope? It is what it is. All I can do is learn from it and not make a mistake like that ever again. I moved out on my own before I was ready. I felt very pressured and judged by others and thought that it was what I needed to do because I wasn't ready. It was probably more stressful on me than it should have been. I was very depressed and very lonely. I lost over half of my savings because I didn't figure out my finances enough before committing. The building I moved to was awful and I had a terrible experience. I moved back home as the pandemic hit and have been trying to save my money back to what it was before, but I feel like I'm in a worse spot now than where I'd be had I just stayed put.